huge amounts of you getting in touch, answering the question I put to you earlier. Will you change your travel plans because of what the government have introduced, these new restrictions on international travel, that you will need a COVID test to come into this country, either a PCR test or a professionally administered antigen test. No such thing as sticking the thing up your nose in the comfort of your own apartment in Santa Ponsa. You have to go and get a doctor to do it. Liv from Laois says, my sister was due to fly to Spain for 2 weeks over Christmas, but is cancelled due to new rules and regulations. It's just too risky. Gareth says, I was meant to be going to Glasgow on Thursday for a 3-day break and coming home on Sunday. I've now cancelled my hotel and my wife is trying to move our flights to next year. There's no point us going for a roughly 72-hour trip if we have to do the antigen test or the PCR test. The UK didn't include Ireland in their international travel as we were in the common travel area, which Simon Coveney praised the UK government for doing. If you're wondering what Garrett is talking about, travellers from mainland Britain, not from the north, but from Britain, will have to comply with these rules. So anybody coming from Scotland, England or Wales is going to have to do the PCR or the antigen. Boris didn't include Ireland in their restrictions for people going the opposite direction. We just had to cancel our holiday today, says somebody else, that we booked in December 2019 for December 2020. We rescheduled to December 2021 and now we've cancelled again. We couldn't take the risk of being stuck abroad. Managed to change our flights to next year with an extra charge, waiting to hear if we will lose the cost of accommodation. And a listener in Kildare says, what about people already abroad who may not get a flight back by Friday? If they test positive, maybe you could have a whole family stuck abroad at huge cost. People returning home should be tested back in Ireland on arrival and then allowed to quarantine at home here. One suggestion from the Hard Shoulder listeners. Keep those experiences coming in on 53106. Let me know, have you changed your travel plans? Or are you going to plough on regardless? 30 cent is the cost of those texts on 53106. Eoghan Corry is the editor of Air and Travel magazine. Oh, there's a few details people are getting in touch about, things they'd like clarity on. Before we get to them, I mean, it's quite obvious, just looking at the text coming into me here, that this is really going to upend people's plans over the next few weeks.
Very much, Kieran. It's a bit of a mess. There's a lot of people, the time is running out on their vouchers or all the rescheduled trips that, started sometime last year. And here they are looking for another reschedule of a reschedule of a reschedule. There's a major question here. The message this sends out from Ireland to the rest of the world, that we're fragile on travel. It took a long time to implement those measures in July that got us moving again. There is an emergency brake system as part of that. It was designed for arrivals into the EU from other countries. We've decided to implement travel restrictions on travel within the European Union. It's pretty much against the spirit of what was agreed, if not the letter of the law. And of course, we're following Portugal, who did it yesterday, and that created a little bit of puzzlement in the European Commission. I'd imagine they're looking at Ireland tonight.
I mean, some might suggest that we're just ahead of the curve, that every other country in Europe is going to do likewise. I mean, what are the sounds coming from Brussels?
The sounds from Brussels are that most of Europe is holding together. The countries that have implemented the emergency brake are using it for 7 named countries in the environs of South Africa. We're unlikely to see any of the major countries moving. There are suggestions of flight bans. France moved with a flight ban, but the Netherlands has held firm. They're still allowing the flights from South Africa. We're pretty much... We were the only country to bring in mandatory hotel quarantine. We were the last. We implemented this 2 weeks after everybody else. We're pretty much dragging our heels in every way when it comes to reopening travel within the European Union. Brussels' argument is we are one unit, a bit like the United States is one unit, but where Ireland has pretty much reverted to the mode where they're one of the first things that they will take action on is in travel, and we don't even have it's probably a matter of time, but we don't have a case of this variant yet.
Dave says, just cancelled our first holiday abroad without the kids since our honeymoon 20 years ago. Meant to be going to Tenerife on Thursday for 5 nights, and we're absolutely gutted. Somebody has texted in, somebody else in 53106, to say, can you ask Eoghan if there's any clarification on whether antigen tests for flight arrivals is needed for children under 12?
Okay. Oh, this much we know, that it's likely to be reintroducing the state of affairs that applied until July the 8th. That means that under the age of 12, you don't need a test. Now, that means your 12th birthday. It's not actually your 13th birthday. It's up to 11 years of age. But that's likely what we'll see again on Friday, pretty much reverting to the situation before July, the regulations before July, with the important addition that an antigen test is now recognised. That was not recognised before July. And as you said in the intro, the home test is not being recognised. I would expect that something like a pharmacist's test would probably be recognised. But all of that is to emerge in the detail. The way these things work, Kieran, as you well know, is a minister makes a statement in the Dáil and a whole load of officials then are spend the night trying to mop up the bits and pieces as to what actually applies.
Eoghan Corry is still with us, the editor of Air and Travel magazine. I don't kind of, again, people getting in touch with kind of questions and looking for clarifications. This listener says, I had to get a PCR test today for an event in London on Thursday for one night away, and now I'm going to have to get another one to return on Friday, which is crazy. Is that the situation? Or I understand maybe this one PCR test for a short trip might cover that.
A PCR test will cover you for your trip over to see the match. It's 72 hours generally. It lasts 48 hours for the antigen. But here's the thing, Kieran. The antigen test is not very expensive. When people are saying they're cancelling because it's now required to get the antigen before they return, sit back and sleep on it, because the prospects of failing it would mean that you would not be travelling anyway. You're not supposed to get on board an aircraft if you have any COVID symptoms. And for instance, the trip to Florida requires a PCR test on this side before you fly there. Doesn't require one, or didn't require one until Friday in the other direction. Let's just weigh up the benefits of taking the trip and the cost of the antigen before we start cancelling everything. It's not the biggest deal in the world. Remember, we all had to do a PCR test before coming back into Ireland and even flying out to other countries up to July.
Yeah, but I suppose people's fear is, and you heard it from some of the callers, their own, is not the cost of the test. It's that they failed the test, and then it's the cost of being stuck abroad for an extra couple of weeks.
It's a very interesting one that most of the travel insurance companies ran away from COVID because they didn't know the potential cost of it. But now nearly all of them have policies that cover your 14-day extended stay should you have to delay your return home. Remember, there's nothing changed about that. You're not allowed on an aircraft if you have COVID. There's very big penalties when you tap your I agree for Ryanair. It says you don't have COVID symptoms or you're not suffering from it. So there's not much change on that side. What is changed is they're looking for evidence of the test, and they will look for the evidence at the boarding gate. Remember this, we've had denied boarding over European digital COVID certificates in airports like Malaga in recent weeks. They will look at as you check in, and then at immigration they may check again just to make sure once they have your locator form, they will know. So the process is quite easy compared with when it was first introduced because of QR codes, the ability to put it on the mobile pass. And before we cancel everything, just work out the antigen test ain't as expensive as the PCR. That's a bit of progress. It's absolutely shocking that Ireland has, the first test of our participation in the European travel system, we've stumbled over it. Yeah. That is an absolute shock. But from the customer's point of view, it's something that maybe we can put up with, and it is an extra little hurdle, but it's not as big a hurdle as it was before July.
The details change of the story, but the message remains the same in the hard shoulder. Don't panic when it comes to these rules and regulations. Don't necessarily pull the plug, yet you might still be able to enjoy that holiday. And remember, all of the, I suppose, the people